This is the Christmas Movie Screenwriter Podcast, episode number 17. Hello and welcome to the Christmas Movie Screenwriter Podcast. I'm your host, Karen McKeon. The Christmas Movie Screenwriter is a podcast about writing, producing, and selling Christmas movies. You can check out a transcript of this interview on the website. Just go to christmasmoviescreenwriter.com and look for this episode, which is number 17. A quick few words about what I'm working on. My faith-based script is out to readers. With any luck, I'll be contacting my target buyers starting next week. And now, here is the main segment. Jesse Eichmann has been in the media and entertainment business since 2000. He most recently produced Christmas Island and Take Me Back for Christmas, both premiering on Hallmark Channel. Jesse directed In Love by Christmas, which premiered on Lifetime Network. He recently executive produced The End of Sex, TIFF 2022, now on Paramount Plus and Showtime, starring Emily Hampshire. Jesse produced When Jews Were Funny, winner TIFF 2013, Best Canadian Feature Film. Jesse has also provided production services for Spotlight, which won the Oscar for Best Picture in 2016, and All Is Lost with Robert Redford. He has produced or executive produced over 50 hours of network television. Well, Jesse, welcome to the podcast.
Excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, I've told the audience a little bit about you, but why don't you take a minute and tell us about yourself and your business?
I am the Chief Creative Officer at a company called Vortex Media. We're based in Toronto, and we do a variety of kinds of movies. We do theatrical films, we do made-for-television movies, made-for-platform movies, a lot of Christmas movies, obviously, and some romantic comedies. And we also have a distribution arm as well. We're distributing around 50 movies a year in Canada. So lots of stuff, all fun. But I know today we're here to talk about Christmas.
There you go. Well, let's start with what are some key elements that you look for in a Christmas screenplay that would motivate you to produce it?
You know, I think at a high level, when it comes to a script, I think it starts with good writing.
Right.
We're really interested in good writers, almost more so than good Christmas movies in particular, because a good writer can, with the right idea and the right concept, get a script there. And so what is the most value to us is somebody who has honed their craft, can work with producers, take notes, really ideate, come up with new ideas, and are great collaborators. So I'd say it all starts with the writing.
When you, just curious, when you have a writer that wants to pitch a Christmas script, let's say it's not for you, do you expect you want to hear other ideas? Is there, like, your advice would be to writers at least have X number of ideas ready to pitch in that meeting, like 5 ideas? Or
I don't think it's ever about the number of ideas. Where an idea comes from can be sometimes a very it's never a straight line, is the truth. I think what we're looking for, and it's not always a fully baked script either. I think, again, we're looking for writers who we know can write, either have a great script that they've written before, and they're people that we want to work with. And that can come really in any form. It could be somebody who's been a union member and written lots of Christmas movies before, or other kinds of movies. It can be a new writer, somebody who's never written a script before. Wow. I'd say a lot of our movies that we have, in fact, the majority of the movies that we've made have been actually from non-union writers. We've had a lot of union writers as well. Okay. But I'd say it's a basket of both union and non-union. And for us, again, just it's talent. But it's not always a fully baked script, and I think that's something that might be a big takeaway for people listening to this. It is usually an idea, a jumping off point, because the Christmas market in particular, since we're talking about Christmas, there's a lot of stuff that's been done before,
right?
And if you thought about it, somebody else has probably thought about it too,
right?
So it's always about a unique way into a story, and then having a writer that can execute on that idea and really develop, I would say, relationships between the characters that
Mm.
the audience will relate to and that will have some resonance with.
Now, Christmas movies, some critics will say, are formulaic. How can writers, now you mentioned a new way into it. How can writers make their scripts stand out?
Let's talk about the formula, because the formula is actually, I think, one of the most interesting uh, parts of the Christmas genre in and of itself. I think, first of all, I would say there is no formula, and I think
Okay.
that's the first thing. There is no formula. There's a lot of tropes. There are things that people expect to be in a Christmas movie, but I think it comes down to tone. It comes down to brand. It comes down to characters, but not formula. And
Okay.
I think formula, if you think about a movie from the perspective of formula, I actually think we're going to land up with something that feels derivative. You're going to feel, the audience will intrinsically feel that they've seen that before, because
Right.
a writer, and I'm talking from the perspective of a writer, and we've had these before come in pitches. And a lot of the times this is what happens, especially if you're new. People come in and they think that they've ticked off all the boxes, right? They go, well,
Right.
I've ticked off all the boxes. I've got my bingo card, because there's such a thing as Christmas bingo. If you're listening to this, and if you ever watched a
That's right.
Christmas movie,
That's
you
right.
played Christmas bingo, right?
That's right. That's right.
There's nothing wrong with Christmas bingo, by the way. I love Christmas bingo. I am a big proponent of Christmas movie bingo. My wife and I play it all the time, and her friends play it all the time too. But it's not like, if you try to actually take the bingo card, and I'm using this as a metaphor for, I think, what is an
Right.
overgeneralization, right? It's like,
Right.
if you try to do it, you wouldn't actually have a movie that was good.
Right.
You would have
Right.
something that felt very derivative. You really would. And so that's the problem when someone thinks about a Christmas movie from the perspective of formula, because they're
Right.
thinking about, and it's not just a Christmas movie. I mean, that really applies to any movie,
Mm.
to any genre. But if we're talking about Christmas movies, you might think, oh, I've got to have a snowball fight. I've got to have a skating scene. I've got to have
Right.
a
Right.
toboggan scene. I've got to have the hot cocoa scene. I've got to have the Christmas market scene. I'd have to have this, the woman coming from the small town, from the big city to the small town. You'd have to, you'd land up with a grab bag of every trope you've ever heard of,
Right.
and it
Right.
would feel, it would feel, again, it would feel derivative. The
Right.
audience doesn't actually want that. What an
Right.
audience wants is a great
Right.
movie. First and foremost, the audience wants a great movie with great characters, executed in a way that feels fresh and new and can be touching. And so, I always caution, especially
Mm-hmm.
when we're talking to writers, or when we're even talking internally about scripts and projects. It's about the characters and the relationships inside a familiar setting, because the audience does want
Right.
something that feels familiar. You can't make a Christmas movie that doesn't feel familiar. You want it to feel familiar. You want to turn on the channel and feel like, it's a
Right.
cozy thing. You can watch it with a hot cup of cocoa, or you can put it on in the background, while you're baking cookies at Christmas. All of that is good stuff. There's nothing wrong with any of that. It's all wonderful, in fact, and it's part of the brand of a Christmas movie that you might see on, say, Hallmark or
Right.
Lifetime, or
Right.
Up TV, or any of the channels that play Christmas movies, right?
Right.
However, what you want at the end of the day is a movie that feels like a movie, with emotional resonance, and characters that you fall in love with. So we did a movie earlier this year called Take Me Back for Christmas. And in the movie, and spoiler if you haven't seen it, but in the movie, the main character sees themselves in an alternate reality. So they actually
Mm-hmm.
they go back. It's kind of like a sliding doors of like what would happen
Mm-hmm.
if you made a wish and you lived in another life. But
Right.
one of the things was, in the other life, she had everything she wanted, including her mother, who had passed away in her real life. She had everything that she wanted except for her husband. And so the main narrative arc of the movie was, she got everything she wanted in life, but she didn't have her husband. So she tried to go and get her husband back. But the core
Mm-hmm.
of that movie, and the reason why that movie really connected with audiences, is there was one particular thing at the very end of the movie where she has to say goodbye to her mother in the new universe. And so this whole glimpse of a new reality was really all about her being able to say goodbye have a chance to say goodbye to her mom, and then come back to the new reality and fulfill her wish and dreams. But that one piece, that nugget for us was super
Right.
fresh, super new.
Right.
And it was something that really connected with audiences on an emotional level. So when I talk about the emotion and character relationships, that's the thing that I'm really talking about. And spoiler alert.
Is that the one where she was on the couch and they're watching an old movie and they have popcorn and she gives her a blanket?
Yes, that's right.
That what you're right. That is a tearjerker. It was great.
Did you see it?
I see it, of course. I saw it.
You saw it. Okay.
I loved it. I loved it. And good for you. You really have a fresh attitude because a lot of writers who want to get into this space, we read some blogs or some blogs say it's got to be Christmas in every scene. You got to have them making cookies. So you have to have them drinking hot cocoa. So it's almost like, it almost is like a formula. So I like your attitude better. It's like, okay, let's go with the fresh idea. But
yeah, it's just about, it's about good writing and craft. And a lot of that is, it starts with a character, it starts with an emotional journey. It starts with making sure that you have a character that, again, it's kind of like, I don't want to say screenplay basics, but you can forget the basics.
Right.
It's really easy to forget the basics. And so we spend a lot of our time just reminding ourselves of what the basics are. And, in the basics, it starts with character, and it's starting with a character who starts in one place and ends in another.
Right.
They have to have an emotional journey. And so what tends to happen, going back to what you were talking about before, what tends to happen when you try and fill out, again, the metaphor of the bingo card, when you try and check the boxes, you actually land up forgetting about the emotional journey, which is actually the reason why people tune in. They want to see the chemistry. They want to see the love. They want to see the relationship and the emotional arc. That's the stuff that I think makes a great Christmas movie.
Right. And Take Me Back for Christmas was a great movie. I loved it. So good on you. And now this next question you sort of already answered. How do you find scripts? Do you tend to hire WGA writers or non-union writers? And you sort of alluded to this earlier. You want to expand on that?
Sure. We will hire either, and it's not about the relative experience of the writer, because we will spend a lot of time developing a movie. It's always about whether or not we think the writer can get there in the end. And that's the most important point. And, the reality is that these movies are hard. They're quite challenging.
Right.
And I think it's easy to relegate the genre of the Christmas movie into something that is easy or tropey, or you've seen it before, so you can copy the formula. And obviously, I talked about that at length, as I have strong opinions about it. But I think it's easy to forget that it is one of the more challenging, in fact, most challenging things, I think, to write well and to write new. And the reason is because people think it's easy, but in fact, it's really hard to do a thing that's been done so many times before, and to do it in a unique, fresh, and to give it a fresh spin. I mean, this year alone, there were some wonderful movies on the networks this year that all had very new ways into stories. I mean, I'll obviously call it one, which was, I believe, Hallmark's number one rated movie on the network this year, A Biltmore Christmas.
Right.
I mean,
I saw that. Yeah,
it's good. A wonderful movie. It's truly a remarkable movie, and it was done in such I mean, it felt familiar. It had all the things that you would associate with a Christmas movie, but it did it in a way that felt, fun and entertaining and fresh, and had the kind of callbacks to the genre that you would expect in a Christmas movie. So it had all of that, and I think it's a great movie to point to. We had another movie, one of our movies, called Christmas Island, that was also on Hallmark this year. I would say one of the differentiating factors in it was, just to give an example, there was a big city girl who went to a small town, but she was a pilot. and she got
Mm.
stranded on an island.
Oh,
She
okay.
got stranded on Christmas Island. So if you think about it, well, there's this enterprising woman who's a pilot, which was a profession that I'm not sure it's ever been on in
Yeah, yeah. You never
before.
see that. You never see
I
that.
don't think we've seen it before. I could be wrong, so I don't want to say definitively, but I haven't seen it in recent times. And they get caught in a storm and they have to land. And where do they land? They land at Christmas Island. So she's in a smaller town. So it's the same thing. It was a an enterprising woman that went from a big city to a small town, but in a way that audiences haven't
Right.
seen before.
Right. That is great. I will get that on my DVR soon. I haven't seen that one, and that one sounds wonderful.
Well, there's a lot to watch out there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I have a list. Now, can you talk about what your ideal budget for a Christmas TV would be? Christmas TV movie?
Yeah, I think it would be. I mean, look, from the perspective of a writer, I actually wouldn't worry about budget too much. Just don't set it in space. Watch the other Christmas movies that are out there. Get a feel for what the edges of a movie are, and you'll very quickly, if you're watching these on the various networks, get an idea for what the edges of a budget are, because it's in as long as you're writing towards what you're seeing on screen, you're not going to go offside. And a lot of the time, you're working with a network, and they're providing you some feedback,
Right.
along the way, and sort of telling you, and you're working with them as well. What can you do? What can't you do? But as a writer, your job is to dream a bit,
Mm.
and sometimes you might fall over the edge, but if you're it's almost a little bit better to fall off the edge and pull back than not try. So
Right.
what's
Right.
funny, because we're talking right now about a new movie that we're developing to hopefully put into production later this year. And I was just talking to the writer about this, and she asked me, she said, what can we do with this? Like, how big can we go? And I said, if you can dream it, we will do one big thing. Dream whatever you
Okay.
want. Just
Okay.
dream that big thing, and we will find a way to
Great.
do it. And it's so there's always room for that one big idea. I mean, obviously, again, we're not strapping anyone to the side of an airplane,
Right. Right.
and we're probably not jumping into the Grand Canyon.
Okay.
Although arguably we could have somebody jump into the Grand Canyon. So there's very little that, like, with some ingenuity, that you can't accomplish, and a lot of these movies have accomplished a lot. I mean, you look at A Biltmore Christmas. It was a period movie. It was a beautifully
Right.
lavish movie. If you can dream it, there's a lot you can do. So when it comes, and again, I'm making this point from the perspective of budget
Right.
and writing,
Right. Excellent.
which is I wouldn't self-censor. So if you're a writer trying to write something, don't self-censor yourself. If it's at all within what you would consider as a writer something that you think, oh, I could see this in this world, go for it. Put it on the page. Because the honest truth is that if you can't do it, there's always another way to get to that same emotional beat, that same core, right? What the scene is always going to be about something.
Right.
So if you're doing a big set piece, which is really what we're talking about set pieces. If you're doing a big set piece and it actually fell outside of the scope of what was feasible, you would still take the same emotional beat of a scene and write a new scene that was a little bit more contained for whatever the budget was. So I wouldn't think about budget when you're writing if you've watched enough movies and you've got an idea for what the edges of these things are. I do think you can get away with a lot.
That's good to hear. Now, can you share how you market and monetize your Christmas movies? Do you utilize, for example, sales estimates to attract sales agents? And what strategies do you employ to recoup your investment?
Oh, this truly is a business podcast. Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay, here we go. A great question. So there's two kinds of movies out there that are, and I'm just going to put this into two buckets. There are movies that are made on spec, and there are movies that are made for a network. If you're working with a network, because that's what most people sort of associate with traditionally how these made for TV, made for platform movies are. Now I'm going to have to get a little granular here on this one, because if you're making network, then or a platform, you've got everything from a massive Christmas musical on Netflix to a slightly more contained Christmas movie on maybe one of the maybe one of the smaller channels. I'll just say that, right?
Okay.
And you've got lots of stuff that's being sold in the independent space as well. But if you're working with a network, and by network, you've got the linear platforms, Lifetime, Hallmark, Up TV, Great American Family Channel, a couple others, but those would be the main ones in the Christmas space. Then you've got the SVODs, right? You've got Netflix, you've got AVODs like Hulu, you've got SVODs like Amazon, right? You've got Apple. And so if you're working with a platform or network, and specifically networks, there's going to be a lot of development. There's going to be a development executive. There's going to be they're going to be part of the financing of the movie. And so they're going to be intimately involved with, again, going back to things like budget and the financing of your project. They will be part of that conversation. So you are not making the movie outside of those financial pieces. That's in that kind of network bucket.
Okay.
In the independent film space, I would call that more of a spec model. So as a company, we do a lot of spec projects, which means we will finance and produce the movie ourselves. We will, instead of, and the formula kind of gets reversed. Instead of sell, and then make it, you're making it and then selling it, right? It's the opposite. So what we do as a company is we independently finance, produce, and then sell the movie. Not all of our movies, but some of them. We do as a spec-based business. So we are the studio, and we finance the way any studio would: finance, make, and then sell the movie in that order. And that's the important part. So to your question, which is, do we go to the market and try and pre-sale? I would say that's more of a feature film model. If you're doing like indie film, the Christmas space, however, there isn't really an indie film financing model for Christmas movies. I'd say you're either working with, there could be some outliers to this, but they'd be very few and far between if there are. You're either working with the SVODs platforms networks, or you're making a movie on spec with a producer/production company that has the budget and financing to put a movie like that together and then take it into the market to sell it afterwards.
So those investors are not in the independent model. You're not getting the money from the platforms and networks up front. You are going into the market for high net worth individuals or some kind of entity. Is that it?
No, not exactly. I'm trying to make this as simple as possible for those who are listening, because it's not easy to kind of wrap your head around, because the independent film space, which I think is slightly different than the Christmas genre, which is so specific.
Right.
In the independent film space, you're working with equity financiers, you're working with foreign sales companies, you're pre-selling, you're working with private investors, and tax incentives and banks, and you're putting all those little pieces together, of which there can be lots and lots of pieces. And you are then making your movie by cobbling it all together and then making your movie. I think if you're talking about the Christmas space, and again, I'm just being ultra specific to the Christmas space, I actually think it kind of splits into two buckets only. And what I just mentioned isn't one of them, because that's the indie feature film model.
Okay.
In the Christmas model, I really think you're talking about one of two models. One is you're working with a network or platform, and they are, for the most part, financing your movie entirely, right? Because, and all movies, by the way, have some kind of tax incentive. So when I say entirely, it's usually that plus some tax incentives or local or regional kind of funding, especially if you're shooting in some other country, which happens a lot. You might get some financing from another country. But again, those movies are being driven and financed by the network.
Right.
Or the platform, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So that's kind of that first bucket that I was alluding to. And the second bucket is just this purely spec-based model, which is that you're working with a production company / financier. Usually they're the same entity. We are that, for example. So our
Okay.
company, we do both, but one of the ways that we make movies is just by financing them ourselves,
Right.
making them with our own capital, and then bringing that finished product into the market to sell afterwards as a finished product. And that's kind of an acquisition based model. So it's kind of like
Right.
this pre-sale model versus an acquisition based model. If you want to
Right.
think about it that way.
Yeah, that's very clear. And thank you for that. Now,
Was it clear?
it was, I
I'm
thought it was
not sure
very
it was
clear.
clear. So you tell me. If it was
I-
clear, I'll move on.
No, it's very clear. It's very clear. It's the Christmas movie market. It's like I was at the AFM recently, and a lot of people do Christmas movies and they sell them, but I'm just curious if that is like the right avenue for a writer to go to sell a script. Is one of these markets? If it's some of these markets are focused on finished films, but
If I was a writer and I wanted to sell a Christmas movie, which might be another way to ask or reframe the question that you're asking. If I was a writer and wanted to sell my Christmas script, I would do two things. First thing is I'd research all the companies in the business that are making Christmas movies. There are a handful. It's not a massively long list. It is a fairly curated list of producers. It's of good size, but it's fairly curated.
mhm,
I would look at all those places and I would try and develop through either your agent if you have one or directly if you don't, some kind of relationship with those producers.
right,
Because that will honestly be the best way, I think, for a new writer specifically, not necessarily established writers who have written lots of these kinds of movies before or have worked in some cases and in lots of cases directly with the network. Newer writers who are trying to break into this space, I think, should establish relationships as best they can with the production companies directly, or if they have an agent, which a lot do, to try and ask your agent to get in touch, usually with samples or providing some kind of samples with these companies. And again, you don't always need to have a finished Christmas script
hmm,
as a sample.
good,
What you need to do is have a good script,
right,
preferably in and around the genre that you're trying to pitch. So if you
right,
had a good romantic comedy that, for example, that wasn't necessarily a Christmas script, but it was a good romantic comedy that could show that you could write, well, that's great. That shows the producer. I'm not just talking about myself, would show any producer
hmm,
that you've got the craft. And then from there, the conversation might be like, oh, hey, I've got three ideas. And the producer would say something like, great, send me a paragraph on each or a sentence on each or something like that. Usually these ideas, especially in the Christmas space, they're developed from the ground up. Not always, but a lot of the time,
hmm,
they're developed from the ground up because what happens is, and I've seen this a lot, so that's why I'm saying this. What happens is a writer will go out on a limb to write a spec Christmas movie. And while that's great, because the market is always changing, you're not necessarily on the pulse of where the market is or where the market's going. Um, you might have written something that is either out of date,
hmm,
being produced already. The version of that is there's already a movie of that in development with the network, and that happens a lot.
yeah,
Or just isn't the thing that the producer's looking for. So again, a good writer with a good script that can just show that you can write with some ideas is sometimes just as good, if not a better approach than trying to hone and craft the perfect, for you as the writer, the perfect Christmas script. That
right,
probably won't get you as far than just having shown that you can write. And that, by the way, that can be produced credits as well on other TV
right,
shows. Like a staff writer on a TV show is
right,
just as well positioned,
hmm.
even if they're junior, to enter this space as somebody who's a newer writer that's trying to get their first job.
And the second one, you mentioned there was two ways. If you were a writer starting out, there was two ways to get your script made. One is to connect with production companies and start a relationship. The second one,
This,
a second way.
yeah, well, I mean, really, it comes down to getting in touch with producers directly, or secondly, if you've got an agent, have your
Oh,
agent
okay,
reach out to those companies. I mean, ideally, it the way into the market, I would say, is easiest as a newer writer through a producer that has made movies in this space before. That would be
Right.
would be the path.
Right. Okay. That's good.
Listen, listen, another great hot tip.
Okay. Hot
I
tip.
get a lot of pitches like this too. Hot tip. Um, if you've got a colleague who is a writer that is willing to vouch for you, that knows the producer, get them to reach out on your behalf
Oh,
and say,
okay.
hey, my
Good.
friend, John, he's a great writer. He
Okay.
wants to get into the Christmas space.
Yes.
You should take
Yes.
a look at him, right? So
Yes.
having somebody who already has a relationship with the company
There
that
you
you
go.
want to have a relationship with, get them to vouch for you. That'll at
That's
least
a good
get you in
tip.
the door.
That's a good tip. Good tip. Okay. So, how important is original? Now, you sort of alluded to this earlier. How important is originality in a Christmas TV movie script? And what advice would you give a screenwriter looking to put a unique spin on a well-loved holiday trope?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm not sure I have a great answer for it though, because it's one of those things where you know it when you hear it or when you
Mm-hmm.
read it or when you see it. I don't know. I don't know what the version of that is, but it it's like kind of like saying, "Hey, how do I come up with the new great thing? What's the new great thing? If I knew what the new great thing was,
Right.
I'd be doing it
Right.
all day long."
Right.
And one of
Right.
the great things about working with great writers, or again, writers who can write,
Mm-hmm.
is they will come up with new ways into established ideas, which is always the thing that you're looking for. And so I don't have all the answers, and I don't want to have all the answers. I want to be working with great writers who have all the answers, or who have their own vision, unique take, spin on something that they've seen before. I mean, I would definitely say educate yourself in what's been done before. And educate yourself on, if you're a writer, educate yourself on the different tones, because each platform, each network will have a different brand recognition, a different tone, a different cadence to the movie. I can tell you that if you watch a movie on one network versus another network,
Right.
or one platform versus another platform, they don't all feel the same.
Right.
There are differences. And the more you can understand what those differences are, I think the better position you'll be to speak to that particular market and to potentially what the needs of those networks and those platforms are. But again, it's just going to come down to somebody understanding the brand and the tone of a
Right.
Christmas movie, which is really different than other genres.
Exactly. I don't think you'd see a Christmas Cowboy on GAC network. Christmas Cowboy was famous for supposedly a sex scene, and I'm like,
Yes, yes.
did I
Well,
did
yeah.
I blink and miss it? But anyway, it was great publicity.
It was wonderful publicity. That was on Lifetime
Oh,
this year.
Lifetime, right?
It was on
Okay.
Lifetime this year, and
Lifetime, of course,
yeah, no,
Lifetime.
it's very exciting, but it's something new, right? They tried something new, and they did something new, and it brought attention to the network. Super exciting, fun, to do. And listen, there was a time when, and I'll just, I mean, this is more just historically accurate. There was a time when diversity wasn't as big on the networks, and it has, since, in the years since, say, some of the earlier Christmas movies, has become a big part of what you
Hmm.
see now regularly.
Right, right.
It's not even, it's like, it's less so, it's just a regular part of the conversation, whereas previously it wasn't. And that is, and so this scene that you're talking about,
Mhm.
well, it's just something new.
Right,
It's just
right.
it's just, this is something new, and every year there's something new. Every year there's things that are different. Every year there are things that you haven't seen before that you're like, oh my god, I never thought I would have seen that
Right.
on or in in a Christmas movie. And that's what's fun, because every year there's an evolution in the quality of the storytelling.
Do you think that the Christmas TV market is oversaturated or is growing or stagnant?
I think there has been a decline in the Christmas movie space. I think it's a harder space now than it was. I think there was a a bit of an arms race between
Mm.
some of the platforms and networks for Christmas movies. If you look at the number of Christmas movies, just the sheer absolute value, the number of Christmas movies that were made over the course of the last 4 years, you'll see a spike and then a slowing decline. Hmm. It's still a very competitive space. There's still a lot of Christmas movies that are being made, but I would say it's more competitive. It's more curated. The need for talent is greater, and the need for stories that resonate at a much higher level.
Right.
And I'm using that statement kind of broadly,
Okay.
but I think that there's a demand for better storytelling in the space, which just means, there's a very general, might be a hyper generalization, but less but better,
Right.
right? There might be more resources going into slightly fewer
Right.
product,
Right.
which is kind of how things go, right? You spend a lot of money to get a lot more, then you realize, hey, maybe we can make a few less,
right,
but make the lesser amount all that much better.
Quality
but there have been new Sorry.
I was going to say quality over quantity, but you were saying?
Yeah, no, exactly. To a certain extent. I mean, but there have again been some new entrants in the market as well. So
right, true.
It's overall, I would just say though it's a more competitive space than I think it has been.
Okay, that's good. All right. Now, if you could give advice to your younger self about producing Christmas movies, what would that be?
I don't know. What would I advice about Christmas movies? I it I'd say in this would be more of a advice for maybe the executive or the director, but also very much for the writer. It's kind of more of a holistic viewpoint. It's always about the relationships between your number one and number two. The viewers are there to really immerse themselves and fall in love with your leading male and your leading female, your two protagonists. And so it's the attention to that. I think the more you can put your attention on the relationship and the quality of that relationship, the more I think that the audiences will tend to enjoy movies in this space.
Well, that's good to hear. It's good it's very relevant for writers or directors, executives, because you need to focus on number one and number two. So that's good. Now, what is the best way for screenwriters to connect with you or submit their ideas or scripts?
Well, our website is Vortex Media, and there's a little contact button there, and there's a way that people can get in touch with us if they so choose. And that's where I'm at. That's where I am, and I'm on TikTok at my name, Jesse Eichmann, where I like to talk about screenwriting and the business of film.
Okay, well, you sort of answered my last question, and I'm going to just repeat those social media details.
Oh, sure.
To wrap up, would you like to share any social media details so our audience can keep track of what you're doing? And can you repeat those social media links?
Oh, yes, absolutely. At Jesse Eichmann on almost all the platforms, but mostly I spend a lot of my time on TikTok talking about film financing, the business of film, and the craft of screenwriting, which are all things that I love to chat about.
Well, excellent. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience. Thank you for coming on the podcast today.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me on it. It's so much fun to talk about. I could probably talk about this for hours on end. So I appreciate what you're doing, and thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Jesse. And now for my checklist of actions to take for my interview with Jesse. Today I have 4 main action steps. Number 1, focus on relationships in writing. Prioritize developing strong, emotionally compelling relationships between characters and scripts. Ensure that character development and emotional journeys are central to the story. Number 2, understand the brand and tone. Research the brand and tone of networks/platforms producing Christmas movies. Tailor your scripts to fit the specific requirements of these networks or platforms to increase the likelihood of acceptance. Now I'm going to take a little bit of time to give you examples of what I mean. So let's start off with Hallmark, their brand and tone. They are family-friendly and heartwarming. Their focus on traditional values and feel-good stories. They often feature small-town settings, romantic plots, and happy endings. Examples would be Mystic Christmas and The Santa Summit. Here's some action steps to tailor your script to fit the Hallmark brand. A, focus on creating warm, romantic, and wholesome stories. B, ensure a happy ending, and incorporate elements of traditional Christmas celebrations. Next, Lifetime. What is their brand and tone? Similar to Hallmark, but often with more diverse storylines. They are slightly edgier and sometimes incorporate real-life issues within the festive context. There's a mix of romance, drama, and comedy. Examples include A Cowboy Christmas Romance and Mom's Christmas Boyfriend. Action steps to tailor your script to fit the Lifetime brand. A, develop diverse and relatable characters. B, be open to addressing contemporary issues within the festive context. Next, the Netflix brand. Now, they have a wide variety of tones, ranging from lighthearted and whimsical to more mature and complex stories. They're willing to take creative risks and explore unconventional narratives. Their films often include elements of fantasy, adventure, and more diverse character backgrounds. Examples include The Christmas Chronicles and Christmas as Usual. Action steps to tailor your script to fit the Netflix brand. A, explore unique and creative storylines. B, consider incorporating fantasy elements or unconventional plots. Now, next is Up TV's brand. They focus on uplifting and inspirational stories. They're family-centric with strong moral lessons. They're clean and wholesome content, suitable for all ages. Examples would be Yuletide the Knot and Christmas Lucky Charm. Action steps to tailor your script to fit the Up TV brand would include A, write inspirational and morally uplifting stories. B, keep content family-friendly and focus on positive messages. Next is the ABC Family/Freeform brand and tone. They target a younger audience with contemporary settings. They often feature coming-of-age stories, modern romance, and lighthearted comedy. There's a mix of Christmas themes with modern twists. Examples, The 9 Kittens of Christmas and The Truth About Christmas. FYI, the Walt Disney Company owns ABC Family and rebranded the channel to Freeform. Here's some action steps to tailor your script to fit the Freeform brand. A, aim for modern, relatable settings and characters. B, infuse humor and contemporary themes appealing to a younger audience. Now, action step number 3, build industry relationships. You should actively connect with producers and companies specializing in Christmas movies. You can leverage your personal and professional networks to get introductions and build relationships. You should use social media for networking. For example, engage with industry professionals on platforms like TikTok. Follow and interact with producers who share insights on film financing and screenwriting. Number 4, leverage existing scripts. Have a portfolio of good scripts in the same genre ready for submission and focus on quality and relevance to the market. Well, that's the show. Thanks for listening. To show your support, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can check out other great podcasts and blogs on our website at christmasmoviescreenwriter.com. On the next episode of the podcast, I interview screenwriter Isabel Dreen. She discusses building relationships in the film industry, how emotion is more important than originality in Christmas movies, her upcoming book on screenwriting, as well as her Christmas masterclass. I'm your host, Karen McCann. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next Christmas Movie Screenwriter podcast. Bye.